All right, so today we're going to talk about FEMA ICS forms. All right, so just to get started, let's talk about what FEMA is. FEMA is the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and it's part of the Department of Homeland Security. It used to be part of the Interior, but now it's part of Homeland Security because they added a new department. I guess they felt like they needed it. FEMA was founded in 1979 by Jimmy Carter, and it is responsible for preparing for, protecting against, responding to, and recovering from natural disasters, man-made incidents, and terrorist acts. So what kind of natural disasters would we be subject to around here? Tornadoes. Earthquakes, possibly flash flooding or floods of some type. Landslides, windstorms, things like that, right?
Crickets.
Giant crickets. Other states may worry more about hurricanes, things like that, or violent weather events like wildfires. We do have wildfires here. FEMA can be involved in those things. Man-made incidents, that could be anything from a hazardous waste spill to, somebody's doing something stupid and bad things start happening. So train derailments are a big one, right? They can also be the cause of wildfires.
Actually, the area where the most hazardous material is transported in the U.S., you wouldn't guess where it is.
I-15 corridor, I don't know. Bountiful. So on our way back from Idaho Falls last week, we're cruising along and here's a semi that we're passing, and it has these 3 giant casks on it with radiation symbols on them. And I'm like, holy crap, that's nuclear waste right there.
Can you see it leaking?
No, nothing was leaking. There were no green fluids coming out. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Modern Problems, but no, unfortunately, no. Or fortunately, no. And then later, we were continuing our drive and came across another vehicle that had one of the radioactive material casks that has the big bumpers on the top and bottom. So it's for high-level nuclear waste. And so that was traveling down I-15 on the back of a truck. So, these things are out there. We don't always pay attention to them, but they are out there. As terrorist acts as well, there's always, we just had a memorial event for the 9/11 tragedy, and that was a terrorist act. And sometimes people do bad things to other people, and FEMA can respond to those as necessary. The FEMA mission statement is to help people before, during, and after disasters. So a lot of people say, oh yeah, FEMA, blah, 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 they're not going to really help. And in fact, we have been told by our local authorities, don't expect any help from FEMA for 96 hours at a minimum. That's 4 days. So, and you're thinking about your preparedness, it's a good idea to plan for 5 days of being self-sufficient. So, don't be expecting any help for a while. But FEMA's job is to come out and help people when things like that happen. So they would respond in a case like that. All right, so let's talk about ICS. ICS is the Incident Command System. This is a standardized approach to incident management. It's not just the forms, it's actually a system that was developed to respond to incidents, and it's used to respond to incidents at all levels of government, both local, state, and federal. They work with anything from small incidents up to large complex incidents. The same system is functional in all of those. Now, you may combine some functionality on a smaller event, but the system, the way the system is designed and works, it is effective in dealing with these things at all different levels and all different sizes. It can be used for emergencies and for planned events, and it helps coordinate the response among various jurisdictions and agencies. So quite often, if you have a localized event, you may have the fire department involved, police department involved, you may have some other groups that have to get involved. Those groups typically have different communications mechanisms. They have different reporting structures. They have different command structures. ICS helps them keep all of that together, organized in one unified command system. It's a common process for incident management and for resource management. When we talk about resource management, we're not talking about necessarily just physical resources. We're talking about people resources. We're talking about facilities and equipment that might be available as well. So it allows the integration of those resources in a common organizational structure. So I suggest you learn more about ICS because it's a really cool system the way it's designed. There's kind of this structure involved where you have an incident commander who takes responsibility for the entire incident, and then it's broken out into multiple areas like the public information officer, the liaison officer, safety officer, operations, planning, logistics, and finance. A lot of people think finance. We never think about finance. That's not a big thing, right? It can be a big thing when you're dealing with a large incident. Money has to get spent, right? All those people that are responding have to have food, shelter, and everything else, as well as the people that are affected. So you need to be able to plan for that and have that understood. So this system encompasses all of that. Now, when we talk about how this standardized form systems work, this is a set of standard forms and documents that are used to convey information and instructions or directions. So it describes the strategy for handling the event, the objectives, the priorities, and any other considerations that may be required in dealing with an event. And it provides a record of what happened and who was involved. And believe it or not, that record keeping part is probably the most important part of these forms, right? Because if you don't have it written down and you don't know that it happened, you can't prove that it happened, then it might as well not have happened, right? So if you don't have that information, for one thing, you can't justify what you did, you can't pay for what you did, and you can't prevent repeating mistakes that were made or train for future events that may be similar. So it's just a critical system for this, and the forms are just an important part of that. So what are the forms that are involved? We're going to just run through the 200 series here. So we start with the ICS 200, which is the Incident Action Plan cover page, and that's we'll talk about these in a little more detail as we go on. But think about this as just like an overall cover for the whole incident from start to finish. The ICS 201 is the incident briefing. 202 is incident objectives. There are also some subforms to some of these, like the 202A, which is a command direction form, and 202B, the critical information requirements. The 203 is the organizational assignment list. 204 is the assignment list with specifics. 204A has attachments to that, and we'll talk about some of these forms in a lot of detail as we go on. The 205 is the incident communications plan, and the 205A would be the incident radio communications plan. What types of communications might we use in an incident like this? Radio, ham radio. We would use radio, obviously. What else might you use, Dan? I think you said it.
I'm sorry?
I think you just said it. What did you say?
I said whatever communications is available.
Whatever's available, right? So there's more than just radio that might be needed or used in the incident communications plan. The 206 is the medical plan. 207 is the incident org chart. 208 is the site safety and health plan. 209 is the incident status summary. 210 is the resource status change. And again, this is not just physical resources like equipment, but it's also facilities and personnel. Those are all considered to be resources as far as the ICS is concerned. The 211 is the check-in, check-out list. This one is important because it tracks which resources are currently in use and which resources are not in use. So you might think, well, geez, if there's an emergency, I'm going to work it until it's solved. Well, what if it goes on for 3 days? You're going to have to take breaks. You're going to have to sign out and let somebody else take over your station for a while because you're going to have to rest, right? So we even talked about that in a previous class where we talked about how, being able to hand off your tactical call sign to another operator while you take a break from the incident is critical, because otherwise you're not going to be fresh and you're going to be making mistakes, right? So this form is used to track as resources come in and go out of service. The 213 is the general message form. So basically messages that are sent from one place to another need to be tracked, and they're tracked on this form. There's a subversion of this form called the 213RR, which is a resource request message, which is used to request a resource. The 214 is the unit log, and the 214A is the chronology of events log. And these are where you write down everything that happens during the event at your particular unit. So these would all be coalesced back together by the incident commander or their team at the end of the incident, so that all of this is kept in one place together. But 215 is the operational planning worksheet, and the 215A is the incident action plan safety analysis. 218 would be support vehicle and equipment inventory. 219 is a resource status card, which basically shows what level of usability each resource is at. The 220 is the air operations summary. 221 is a demobilization checkout. As the incident is coming to a close, every station, as they go offline, they need to fill this form out so that we track how things are closed out and ended up at a station.
It's also for shift changes.
Also for
Demobilization.
shift changes.
Ask the buck.
So Dan says also for shift changes, for example, when you're handing off to another volunteer or worker, then that would be a time that you would use that form. 225 is the incident personnel performance rating. This is one that's used as a summary after the event. 230 is the daily meeting schedule. 232, the resources at risk summary. Yeah, there's a lot of forms, right?
It's the government.
It's the government thing, right? 233 is the incident open action tracker. So if you've ever worked an event and you've worked net control on an event and you've had like requests come in, those become open incidents in your log. And you want to keep track of those because you don't want to forget about things that are outstanding, right? You want to make sure that you log that when that resource is satisfied. And this form is used to track that kind of information. 234, the work analysis matrix. The 235 is the facilities needs assessment worksheet. And then there are some unnumbered forms, which, as far as I can tell, the tactical worksheet is basically anything that doesn't fit one of these other forms that you need to keep track of. Could be things like maps, could be things like diagrams of locations or things like that. And anything that you're working on during the course of processing something. And the tentative release list, I'm assuming that's related to resources that want to go offline and being able to track that. So
Where's the ISC box?
the ISC box,
That you should have one with all those things in it. Shouldn't you?
ICS box.
The box you put all the forms in?
You mean like the garbage can? I don't know.
No, I'm making light of all the forms.
Yes, there are a lot of forms. It's a lot of forms, right? There's a lot of forms. We don't really care about a lot of these forms as communications people, right? There are some that we really do care about, some that we don't care so much about. Steve. So typically these forms will be generated or distributed by the agency as they take over the event, right? And we talked about, in a previous class, we talked about races versus Aries, and how like races can only operate when they've been told that an event is happening. So when FEMA says we are activating races right now, then you can operate as a races operator. But Aries, being a private organization, can do things before that happens and after the event is over, where races cannot, right? So we did talk about that kind of thing, how an organization would get activated in the event of some kind of event, some kind of emergency or something. Dan.
As far as Suffolk County Aries goes, there's 6 forms, 5 that are used. The 6th would be the 221, the demobilization. That's kind of optional. We like to have it, but there are 5 forms that are
That Aries cares about.
Of Aries.
Yeah. So Dan says there are 5 basic of these forms. There are 5 of them that Aries really cares about. We're going to talk about some of the ones that we care about as radio operators. We are communications people, right? So we're primarily going to work with forms that are related to communications, but we also will interact with other departments, groups, personnel, etc., as needed. And so we may encounter some of these other forms. It's a good idea to get familiar with all of the forms, but keep in mind the ones you're really going to care about are the ones that are related to communications. The main ones that we care about would be the ICS 205, the Incident Communications Plan. So this form keeps information on assignments for communications equipment, summary of information from the Incident Action Plan, specifics such as frequency assignments. They might be here or on the 204 assignment forms. It's usually prepared by the leader of the communications unit. Now, when we were having our CERT training, we were advised that when you walk into a scene as the first person on the scene, you become what? The incident commander, right? Suddenly you have all of this responsibility. Now you may hand that off to somebody later. So like if the fire battalion chief shows up, you might hand incident command off to him. But when you first get there and something is happening and you're the first person there, you're the incident commander, right? You may devolve into the communications unit leader as necessary. You may find yourself placed in some other role down the road, but you need to be aware of what you might be facing in the event of some kind of an emergency situation. If you're the first person to walk on the scene at the tanker truck that's tipped over and is spewing hazardous materials all over, it's your responsibility as the incident commander to get people away from it. Remember the rule of thumb that we were told? When you're seeing a hazmat situation, move away from it until it fits behind your thumb, right? So, that's going to be your responsibility because you actually have that training and you know what you're doing. You're probably not going to be tasked with filling out all of these ICS forms as the incident commander. That's probably going to be devolved onto somebody who is more official than you are. But you may end up as the communications unit leader. You may end up as working on the communications plan and deciding this repeater is available to our use. I'm going to start using this repeater and I'm going to write down we are using this repeater for this purpose on this form so that people know if you do hand it off to the next person who shows up, you have the information. You can give it to them and say, this is the repeater we're using. All the information is here. This is the public service trunk group that we're trying to use, but it's full of people and we can't get on. This is the phone number of whoever. This is the satellite phone location, whatever, right? All of these kinds of things are critical. Dan, you had a comment.
And just for your information, all counties in Utah already have a 205 filled out, and the section manager has that.
So the Aries section manager has that.
Yeah. So this is something that is used today. Right now, we have an active 205, and
so how do we see that? How do we get access to that? Where is that kept?
in an event,
it would be distributed, right?
Then that is when it becomes relevant, yeah.
Okay,
Because right now, there's no reason for me to see Davis County unless I go to Davis County and, you know, they request help from Salt Lake County.
right.
Then I get their ICS 205, and vice versa. If they come here, we distribute that out.
And as a liaison, you might be tasked as a liaison between
Yep.
two different counties, right? If they were involved, if a county requested Salt Lake help, you might be tasked as a liaison person to assist in that, and then you would need access to both of those.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and we did talk about the liaison position in that other class that we did, so if you haven't seen that class, I think we have a recording of it. You should go check it out. All right, the 205A is another one that we would care about. That's the incident radio communications plan. We're going to track methods of contact for personnel, units, et cetera, right? It might include amateur radio. It might include public service radio. It might include, who knows what POTS stands for? Yeah, plain old telephone service, right? How many people have a landline phone in their house? 3 of us do. The rest of us have all switched to cellular entirely, right? You think cellular is going to be working too well when the disaster first hits? Probably not, right? The landlines might work, they might not. It depends, right? We don't know, but we want to track that information. If there is a landline number for somebody, that would be a valid contact mechanism. Maybe you can sometimes, even when the cell towers are like so flooded with voice calls that you can't make a voice call, you can still get a text message through, right? An SMS uses very little bandwidth and your phone will keep trying to send it. So it has a pretty good chance of getting through at some point, yeah.
And this is one of the reasons why it's important to have an out-of-state contact, because many times you can dial long distance.
But not local.
But not local.
Yeah.
All the local stuff is tied up, and if you dial to Denver, you may be able to talk to somebody.
Yeah, Dan points out, have an out-of-state contact, because sometimes the long distance circuits are available, even though the local circuits are tied up. So that's something to consider if you're in a situation like that. 205A, usually prepared by the communications unit leader. So again, you may be tasked with that. If it's an Aries event, they probably already have one, right? So at least for the critical people. The 210, the resource status change. This is one that's used to track changes in a resource. For example, a vehicle arrived or left a scene. Radio operator took over a station, so another operator was released, right? These are the kinds of things that are usually prepared by the individual radio or phone operator who received messages from individual resources, task forces, strike teams. I don't know why we have strike teams, but that's what that was in the document. So division or group supervisors, et cetera. So as a radio operator, you may be told, hey, so-and-so is going off shift right now and so-and-so is replacing them. You fill this out on the 210 resource status change, because when you go off shift, you want to be able to give that form to the person coming on so they know at a glance what the status of every resource is. You know, I need somebody who's the location medical officer. I can look and see this person is the medical officer. They are signed in as of 30 minutes ago. So that's the person I need to go get a hold of. Maybe I'll send a runner to find them or something like that. But you know, that's the type of situation that you're facing here, where you need to be able to track that information. This form is used for tracking that kind of information. The 213 general message form. This is used for any message that needs to move from one resource to another. It's typically originated by the resource that needs to send the message. These typically also have a place for a response on them. So the message form may come back to you as you've passed the message on. You're going to set that in your in-process message queue. When a response comes back, you're going to find that message, write the response on it, make sure it gets back to the originator, right? But these are for sending messages from one place to another. If it's not written down, it didn't happen, right? So you want a paper trail. You want to keep track of this. The RR form, the 213 RR, is a special form, special version of this form, a resource request message. It's specifically to formally request tactical or non-tactical resources as needed. So you might be requesting people, you might be requesting medical supplies, you might be requesting tents, you might be requesting food, who knows, right? These are things that you can log on this resource request form. When those requests get satisfied, you have a place to log that the request was processed, right? And then the tactical worksheet, again, this is basically any other document that you're keeping track of, right? So you are using this to track things like maps, communications, safety, weather events, things like that, right? It's usually prepared by the incident commander or the operations section chief, but you may find yourself working on a tactical worksheet yourself for your own uses. If you do, that form, that paper becomes part of your packet of forms and needs to go back to the incident commander when everything is all done, right? Dan.
Just a note on the RR form. Just know that the resource request also is not only things, but people. As a matter of fact, part of the thing is what qualifications are you looking for on a person request?
Yeah.
You know, do we need a paramedic? Do we need a bona fide ham radio operator? Whatever it is.
Yeah, Dan points out on the resource request, it's not just physical resources, it's people resources as well. And on the request form, you may, it may say something like, oh, I need an MD at this location, or I need a paramedic, or I need an EMT, or I need, whatever I need. Yeah, right. I need an electronics technician or an electrician or a plumber or something like that, right? Resources, different people have different skills. No one person has every skill that's going to be needed in an event like this. So we want to be able to request those resources as we need them. There may only be a small pool of electricians that are available, and they may be in demand at other locations. So the resource request form allows tracking who's requested that resource, who's received that resource, and when is that resource available again to go to the next location. All right, so let's look at some of the forms. So we'll start with the ICS 205, the communications plan. You can see on here, can you see? Is that readable to everybody? I tried to make it as big as I could, but still keep it on one page. So you can see on here, we've got things like the incident name, the date and time prepared, the operational period, and then a list of basic radio channels. And so for each of these channels, it has things like the, zone group, the channel number, function, channel name, assignment, the receive frequency and tone if necessary, the transmit frequency and tone if necessary, and the mode. And it shows A, D, and M. So A would be analog, D would be digital, and M would be, I don't know what M is. Dan, do you know what M is?
M is mixed mode.
Mixed mode. Yeah. So how might we use mixed mode in a situation like this? Well, what if you're set up with a WinLink node and you need to do a peer-to-peer transmission of a file? You've only got one frequency available. You're going to call up on voice and say, hey, stand by to receive a data transmission from WinLink. The receiving station is going to turn their WinLink node on and have it ready to go. They'll tell you they're ready. You switch yours on, you send the digital signal, then you can confirm verbally that the form or whatever information was received. So that would be a mixed usage, right? So, and then of course on the end over here, remarks. That's any additional notes that might be required for each of these things. Obviously, you can have more than one page of this form if you need it, right? If you have more than will fit on the one form, you're gonna go ahead and have a second form, have a third, whatever you need to have to track the event. Depends on the scale of the event. Then at the bottom, we have special instructions. That's for anything that doesn't necessarily fit into the rest of the form. And then you have prepared by and the name and signature of the communications unit leader. And then you'll see at the very bottom, it says IAP page. IAP is the Incident Action Plan, which is basically the document that is distributed that contains all of these forms and all this information. They give you the page number so that you know that you have all the pages, and then the date and time that the form was prepared. So that's the 205. The 205A is the communications list. And again, this one, a little harder to see. It's a different orientation, but you can see we have the incident name, the operational period, date and time from and to. So when you start filling out one of these forms, you're going to write down the date and time that you start. And when you finish at the bottom of the form and you go to the next form, you're going to write the date and time that you closed out this form. And then you'll start the next form, right? And then each column contains things like, what is that? Incident assigned position, the name and method of contact. So here you might have the incident commander, their name, and how to reach them, whether that's via a particular ham radio operator who is shadowing them, or via a phone number, a satellite phone number, or something like that. Could be whatever that communications mechanism is. You might have multiple communications mechanisms for a given person, in which case just list them in order, right? But then, you just want to get this information logged and on paper. At the bottom, you have prepared by, who prepared it, their position and signature, and then again, a page number and a date and time, right?
Why do they say alphabetize on that name?
I don't know why they say to alphabetize it, because this may be dynamic. I think the ultimate goal is to be able to find someone quickly on the list, but it may be more useful to find them by their position than by their name, depending on who they are or what they're doing, right? So this particular form that I downloaded from FEMA, it said alphabetized by name. I'm not sure that that's always the best way to go.
You log it down as the stuff comes in.
I think it's kind of fluid, and I think it's one of those things that at the end of the event, all of these forms are going to be pulled together and summarized. And in that case, maybe in that finalized version of this, you would list it out alphabetically by name. I don't know. But I would put them down. I don't know. I would put them down as you encounter them, or in whatever manner it helps you. Well, I'm thinking like the communications unit leader at the end of the event might create new copies of these forms with a summary from all of the different subunits, right? Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question.
Because I know the forms we filled out for civil air patrol, they had.
If you've signed it, you've signed it.
You signed it.
Yeah, that's the one that you signed. So.
And you group them together and you can do summary, but the individual forms are.
Yeah, I wouldn't change the form after you've signed it, but like I say, maybe there's a summary copy of these forms at the end where everything is coalesced into one
Even the
form.
electronic version,
It doesn't alphabetize it.
So-
Yeah. So
And besides that, I think that is the least important column out of everything.
is the name. I want to know the position of the person, right? That's what I care about.
I want hazmat one.
Yeah.
versus Joe, because Joe can change.
Yeah.
the area.
I agree. I agree. I'm not sure why they say it, why they put it that way.
Correct.
All right, so the 210 is the resource status change. Remember, we talked about that one a little bit already. This is where, as resources come in and out, you're going to log them. And so we have on here the resource number, new status, whether they're available or assigned or what, from where they came from, what their status was, to where they're going, what their new status is, time and date of the change. And of course, this is something that, you know, you would be advised of. So-and-so is coming online as the new hazmat one, and so-and-so is going offline. So Mary is no longer, so you would release Mary to be from hazmat one to off duty. And then Joe would be coming online as hazmat one, so it would come from off duty to hazmat one. Dan.
And just so you know, the Utah Aries, we do not use 210, we use 214. Instead of that, the activity log. The activity log allows us to kind of incorporate multiple forms in, and so it's less formatted. And which means that you have when there's an incident that is taking someone's time, I don't want to have to go through 15 different forms
To find every place where they were used, yeah.
A resource change goes on the activity.
Yeah.
And if someone after the fact wants to do that, but
And
Utah just uses it.
Operationally, you might have a big whiteboard with names written on it for
Right.
each position, right? And so that's your reference when something is happening is I'm going to look at, like, if you're at the EOC and they're tracking this information, they're going to be writing down what the current state of things is on a board. This form is to log those changes as changes are made to that. You would log those changes, right?
So bringing me to my next point, this form is typically used by the command, the ICS, the chiefs, the directors, that kind of stuff.
Right.
But us in communications, we don't use it per se.
All right.
But
That makes sense. All right, so 213, the general message form. Now, this is the one that you're going to see a lot of if you're doing communications for an event, right? This form is basically pretty free form. I mean, it's got some sections on it. You've got who the message is going to, who it's coming from, the subject, date, and time, and then you've got a big block for the message. So that's basically you're going to put in that message, and then approved by name, signature, and position or title. That would be the person who sent the message. They wrote down what they wanted to say and they approved that that was the message that they wanted sent. Any replies that come in, you're going to log in this part of the form, replied by name, position. You probably won't have a signature if something come in, but you as the radio operator may sign that. And then date and time. So this is a form, you notice this is not part of the IAP. This is just a generic form. You're gonna have a whole stack of these by the time the event is done, right? You're gonna pass those back to the people as responses come in. So these messages forms are basically to keep track of something in a written format so that when you're trying, I mean, you guys have all played the telephone game, right? Where you sit in a big circle and you start with a message at one end and it slowly goes around the circle. And then by the time you get to the end, it's a completely different message about something completely different. This is to prevent that from happening, right?
my wife and I play that every day. You tell me a message and I hear something completely different.
You're not the only one. No. All right, and then let's look at the 213 RR, the resource request message. This one is, again, as we talked about, that a little bit more specific type of message, specifically for resource requesting. And again, you've got incident name, date and time, resource request number, and then these are the things you're ordering or requesting. It says use additional forms when requesting different sources of supply. So if the source of supply is medical, you would have a form that you're filling out for that. If you needed medical materials and personnel, you would use a separate form for the personnel. You wouldn't request an MD on the same form as you're requesting Band-Aids and slings or whatever.
The 213, you can do both of them.
You could, but it specifically says use a different resource form for different sources. And then you've got quantity, kind, type, detailed item description. And then when it arrived, when it was requested, when it's estimated to arrive, and then there's a cost column. we really don't care about the cost during the event. After the event, this stuff is all gonna get summarized and rolled into a giant document that describes what happened. And that's where they're gonna track those costs. If you know it, you can include it. You're probably not gonna know it. And then you've got requested delivery or reporting location, where it's gotta go. If there's any substitutes that are acceptable, or if you're suggesting a place to get it from, go down to Walgreens and grab a box of Band-Aids and ship them over here, right? Bust in if you have to. We don't care, right? Requested by name, position, I didn't say that out loud. Requested by name, position, priority, urgent, routine, or low priority. Urgent means somebody's gonna die if I don't get this as fast as possible. Routine means nobody's gonna die right now, but if it takes, a few hours to get it, it may become urgent. So I want to get it on the next normal delivery, right? And then low is whenever you got a chance, get it to me, right? Section chief approval, then we have the logistics section here has a section, logistics order number, name of the supplier, any notes, supplier contact information, approved by the logistics rep and date and time. Then we've got order placed. I don't know what SPUL or PROC stand for.
Process.
Could be. I'm not sure what those are for. Reply comments from finance. This is the finance section. And then the finance section signature signed off on paying for the item, whatever it was.
So just clarification on line item number 4 there, order.
Uh-huh.
What that means is if you use the 213RR, but if I have a mix of personnel and Band-Aids, I'm going to use another ICS 213RR and do material supplies, medical stuff.
Right.
I'm going to use something else to do. I need water. I need body bags.
Right.
So it's still using this.
It's the same form,
But it's just.
but a different copy of the form. Yeah, exactly.
So the ND isn't placed in, I need MREs.
Right. Because the request for that's not going to go to the same place, right?
Right.
The request for person is going to go to whoever's managing the group of people that are available. Whereas the request for food, water, et cetera, is going to go to somebody who's managing physical supplies like that.
Logistics.
So that's kind of the concept there. All right, so other standardized forms. Other groups use standardized forms, right? The Red Cross has their own version of the ICS forms. It's been adapted from the FEMA forms for Red Cross use. I don't know what the differences are. I just found this in a document that was talking about the Red Cross ICS system, and they mentioned that they have their own adaptations of these forms. Now, that may mean that they have specific titles that are used. They might have specific ways that resources are requested, things like that. They may also have specific forms, like they may have a blood request form, or they may have some other kind of form. Ragnar's got something he wants to say really badly.
Yeah. It was really confusing like 30 years ago when you dealt with Red Cross, because
they're different.
what?
Because they're different.
Yeah,
They're not a government agency.
right, and they, it was more health and welfare that they took over. And it was really confusing because you'd ask for something and Red Cross would respond, because they also have their own communications. So you'd be sending a message out to 2 different people and neither one knew who responded. So a lot of things didn't happen because of that.
Yeah.
And that's why they changed it.
So that's why they've switched to use more ICS type forms. So
Well, that's why they picked up their own form.
their own version of the
They
form.
wanted.
They want their own thing, right? Yeah. Aries, ARRL Aries forms are different. They may fall into the same categories. They may use some of the same numbers. but they also have their own forms for things. For example, the radiogram message is a completely different form for specifically for sending a radiogram using NTS, right? The National Traffic System, right? Thanks, Dave. So there are specific forms that the ARRL has produced that you may encounter when dealing with a situation. The Coast Guard has their own variant of incident forms. Some of the types of incidents that they deal with don't fit into, I guess, the regular ICS system, or they're more fluid than what ICS allows. And so they want their own form for certain types of things. CERT has specific forms associated with it. I forgot to bring my little CERT booklet, but I have a little booklet that has blank forms in it that you can fill out when you need to if you're processing a CERT event, you're working on a CERT event. Then there are shares forms. Now, I don't know much about shares, but does anybody here know about shares?
Yeah, we share it.
So what is shares?
It's different agencies that get together and they work on HF mostly.
Okay.
And like I had my own station and I would do HF and I would report in and you'd have events, the same thing. And like there was a hurricane in Hawaii and they wanted to check in. And they're different agencies like the Coast Guard and you know, they're used by mostly different agencies.
Okay.
And
So Ragnar says shares is basically different agencies that have produced their own mechanisms or protocols for communications, and that's what they would be using. And then this is one that's kind of cool, the ARPSE. Who's heard of ARPSE? So ARPSE is the Amateur Radio Public Service Event Group, and it was started by Brett Nielsen, who is a local ham here in Utah, KC7IIB, and he actually started ARPSE before Utah SAG was started. And I was talking to him about it, and I said, well, how come you're not, just part of Utah SAG? He says, actually, I predated Utah SAG. And I don't know why Mickey didn't use ARPSE when we already had it, but he chose to do his own thing, which was fine. But they have their own adaptation of ICS forums with a concentration on communications because it's a communications group.
part of it is because Brent went with a lot of commercial, like these, what's it called, triathlon things. And it sort of got confusing working with what's legal and what's not if you're doing commercial. So it was a way for Mickey to stay out of the more what happened.
Things that were of prurient interest.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, that makes sense. All right, so now we're going to look at some examples. I have a couple of examples that I have with me, so let me see how I can do this. See if this works. This may prove to be a little squirrely here, but we're going to give it a try. We could fill this up. No, that's probably not sharing. Let me undo that. We'll just make
Can
it.
you just reshare?
I think I can just make it bigger than make it the size of the whole screen here. All right, I don't know if that's actually coming through the share. Can you get on the Zoom and check if it looks okay on there?
I can.
We'll see everyone later.
See you, Dave. Thanks for coming.
Go to there's the Zoom, logging in. Stand by formatting version. Got it.
Recording in progress.
Okay, everything is muted. So, yeah, I can see appendix C.
Okay, good. All right, so,
Inlet.
oh,
Okay,
okay. So what we have here, this is some examples of an event. And so there's a whole bunch of forms here, and we're just going to kind of go through these and take a look at them. So this is a blank page. All right, so this is the ICS 201, page 1. And the incident name is Tana Boulevard, and it was prepared April 17th, 2003 at 10:12:07 a.m. How many people like this date format? How many people have ever been in the military?
I prefer that way.
You prefer this way?
Yeah.
How do you know if it's month, day, or day, month?
Well, as long as that's 17 months.
Well, it's
Yeah, well, what if it was 4 or 5?
Yeah, I
Sure.
the first one is month.
So you put a 0.
So I like saying like 2003-4-17, because then it's not ambiguous, right?
Also currently.
Sortable, right? Yeah. Okay, so I'm not gonna worry about that right now. I'll also say like 17 April 2003 if I'm being pedantic. But that's the way I usually do it when I fill out a date, is I'll say day of the month, the alpha month name, and then the year. And that's just because of my military background. Okay, so this is on the 201. He's got this kind of overview of the incident, the tank truck overturned here on Tana Boulevard and Rose Street.
It's still there, but
Yeah. It's only been 20 years. The wind is coming from this direction at 5 to 10 miles per hour. He has Division A over here, Division B over here, and Division C over here. And then he breaks that down with Division A being Engine 137, Truck 2, Hazmat 1, and Battalion Chief 2. Division B being Engine 265, Truck 6. I don't know what, I guess these are ambulances, ambulance 2, 4, 6, and 7, and Battalion Chief 1. And then Division C is Engine 4, 8, 9, and Truck 8.
A stands for a
What was that?
units.
Aid?
Instead of medic unit, there's an aid.
Okay, okay. All right, so then we move on to page 2 of the 201, the summary of current action in evacuating civilians from exposed homes, providing medical care and transportation, identified the chemical as chlorotetrafluoroethane. That's a fun one. ERG guide is number 126. 3 divisions were established, A, B, and C. 9 patients were taken to hospitals, and Hazmat is evaluating the leak control procedure. So this is the overview. This is all still part of the 201, right? The current organization. Incident commander was Deputy Chief Johnson. Fire information officer is Lieutenant Carpenter. Planning section chief, Division Chief Cornwell. Division Chief Lester was the operations section chief. And then for A, B, and C, we have Battalion Chief 2, Edwards, Battalion Chief 1, Prislipsky, and Division C didn't have a battalion chief, they had Captain Stevens. They did not utilize any air operations or support. Here we have the resources that were ordered, their identifications. So they ordered 3 engines, a truck, and a hazmat unit for Division A. They ordered 3 engines, a truck, and an ambulance for Division B, and 3 more ambulances, and then 3 engines and a truck for Division C. Then they specified out the individual people resources as well that were available, including police supervisor, Lieutenant Ames, and where he was located. Yes.
Is it my understanding that what this is all about, that you're looking at here is mostly historical data
This is historical, right?
that will be used for planning?
And learning from, right?
Yeah, it's not something that's live.
No. This So this is, again, this is the 201 and the 202. These are forms that are filled out by the incident commander, typically after or in progress of the incident, right? So again, here we have, this is on the 202 incident objectives: protect civilians, treat and transport, protect firefighters, stop the leaking material, evacuate the area, and isolate immediate danger. And then they include a weather forecast for the operational period, so that they have an idea of where the winds were coming from on that. Organizational assignment, these are the people who were assigned to each group. Let's get down to something we care about. Division assignment list. Okay, here we go. This is the communications plan, and I'm sorry, it is sideways, but we'll kind of work with it. So they used channel 1, 2, and 10. Channel 1 was used for command, 2 was used for tactical, and 10 was used for the perimeter branch. That was the cops, if you recall. The frequencies that they were using are listed here, the assignment, and then any remarks about this, how it's being used, who's using it. Incident commander, ops, plans, and logs were using the command channel. Operations was using the tactical channel, and the perimeter branch was using the perimeter channel for the police group. Medical plan, command general staff. Again, this is basically stuff that's filled out after the fact. Here you can see some handwritten copies and stuff. This is the site safety and control plan. So this was probably written out on the spot while it was happening. Entry teams, who was on the different entry teams, what their PPE level was, where they were supposed to go for decontamination, hazard risk analysis. There's the material that was involved. It was in a truck, 3,000, well, I'm assuming gallons maybe, as a liquid. Information about the chemical toxicity. A comment about the gas will dissipate naturally. Site map. Stop, the entry objectives was to stop the leak. Emergency procedures for frostbite and asphyxiation, because those are two of the ones that you're dealing with a compressed gas that's coming out in a liquid form. Incident summary. This relates to the costs.
Zero cost to citizens.
It was totally free.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Taxes didn't go up.
Cooperating agencies, the Red Cross cooperated. Here's a general message form. From DC Johnson to Division Chief Cornwell, I need a plan B for increased evacuation area. Should we be unable to stop the leak of this material? There was no reply.
Because he died.
What do we got on here? This is the check-in list.
I noticed the hazmat people were the only ones in the safe area.
Yeah.
They're not dummies.
Yeah.
Well, they know what they're doing, right? I ain't gonna know what they're. Unit log. So this unit, engine 3 was this unit. These were the firefighters and the lieutenant that was on this engine. And then their log of timeline, they arrived, late supply line,
See,
assumed
this
command.
is old stuff, because that ICS 214 is an activity log.
Yeah,
It's completely.
it's an old
different.
version, right? This is 20 years ago, keep in mind,
Yeah.
this copy of this form. I was just looking for examples of ICS forms, and this is one that I found. Operational planning worksheet. Yeah, some of these have been updated in the interim. But it gives you an idea how you would fill out these forms, right? Somebody had a twisted ankle, so this was an incident log. Compensation for injury log. Claims log. Oh, here we go. We used a backhoe that cost $50 an hour, including fuel. Ultimately, see if there's a total at the end on how much this costs. You needed a jet ski with trailer.
It's like, it's good.
And a Boston whaler, 16-foot Boston whaler. I don't know why they needed that.
Turned it upside down with protection for a lot of stuff.
Total cost of crews, other personnel. Hazard. What was this one? Resource order. We requested level 1 suits and dump trucks with sand. All right, well, that's all that we have on that one. So that's an example of an event that took place where ICS forms were used. Again, this was 20 years ago, so, you know, take it with a grain of salt. All right, this one is using the ARPSD forms. This is the bike MS ride that I participated in a couple months ago. And you can see, this is the event action plan that Brett produced.
He always has trouble because it's the same weekend that.
As field day. Yeah, it's always the same weekend as field day, so it's always a stretch to get operators. I do it every year, so I never do field day. But we have a ARPSE form 202 event objectives for the bike MS when it was prepared, and then the operational period, the event objectives. And again, this stuff was filled out beforehand because we knew this event was going to happen. And there were notes like no paint allowed on the road in Lewiston, to expect first riders on the course on Saturday at 7 a.m. The cutoff for the century is noon, so nobody was able to start after noon if they were doing the full 100. On Sunday, the canyon was closed, supposed to be closed. It actually ended up not being closed, but it was supposed to be closed from 7 to 11. Check the forecast. Roads are open to vehicle traffic. They suggested making sure to wear sunscreen, stay hydrated. Organizational assignment list. So this is basically showing who is going to be on net control, where they were going to be located, who were the SAG operators, and then who was the shuttle operator, who operated the rest stop stations and where they were going to be located, and the time in service for each one of them, right? Then, so there were 2 days for this. So this one is the operational period for the Sunday, which was a little bit different. There was only one net control. They only had 3 SAG operators. And there were only 4 aid stations on the Sunday. Radio communications plan. We had a primary frequency, which was a repeater frequency. This is normally a linked repeater system up there in Logan, but the Logan, the Bark Club disconnects the other repeaters during our event so that we can use our repeater, this repeater exclusively. We also had a backup repeater frequency and a simplex tactical frequency. They also logged the police frequency that was being used. Dispatch was monitoring this trunk group, event 10. The MS staff had a rental system that they used. There was also a phone number for rider hotline. And then they gave us the dispatch phone numbers for non-emergency dispatch. We were advised to call 911 for emergencies. Each unit had one of these forms that they would fill out basically who was at the station and log of major events. I don't have a copy of mine because I gave it back to Brett at the end, but basically log like when I got to the station was opened. Any resource requests I logged on this form, that kind of stuff. And then I used a new form for the Sunday as well. Then there's a map of the event. And basically, this is just showing the start and finish of the race at the Cache County Event Center. This is an overview of the race course on Saturday. So you can see they started here in Logan, went up through this way. There was 8 stations at each one of these plus marks. This is the one I was stationed at. A lot of times the riders didn't know what they were doing. They didn't know where they were supposed to go when they were heading out of here. And so I got to refer to my map a lot and show the riders, well, if you're doing the 100-mile, go this way. If you're doing the 75 or the 50, go this way, right? So that they would know which way to go. And it goes clear up into Idaho. You only do this part here if you're doing the 100. This was the lunch station here. And then they would come back through this way again on the way back in. And then on the Sunday, basically they started in Logan and went south down here to Hiram. And then if they were doing the ride up the canyon and then back down, and then they could head back into Logan this way. And then there's just some summary information that's helpful to people as they're working this event. And that's about it. So those are my examples. All right. Oh. And that's it.
Thank you.
So any questions or comments that need to go on the recording? Uh-oh, somebody's got a warning.
Life is well.
All right, I'm going to stop the recording.